Say this for 7 days, and people start offering you money. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the words you speak in faith are the very words that open the storehouse of supply, and something in you has already suspected this is true. Some quiet part of you that has watched money arrive from strange and unexpected doors and wondered if there was a law behind it. There is a verse tucked into the prophet Isaiah, chapter 65, that has quietly changed more lives than almost any other line in Scripture. It reads, "Before they call, I will answer, and while they are yet speaking, I will hear." And Florence Scovel Shinn would stop you right there and say, "Do you see it?" The answer is not waiting for the need to become desperate. It is not waiting for you to beg or to prove your worthiness. The answer is already moving before the words have even finished leaving your mouth. And if that is true, then the real question is never whether supply is willing to come to you. The real question is whether your own words have been calling it in or quietly waving it away. And if you have ever felt that no matter how hard you worked, the money slipped through some invisible crack, you are not the only one. Most people were taught to chase supply with worry, when Florence Scovel Shinn taught that supply is drawn by faith, spoken aloud, in a calm and certain voice. So before we go further, let us plant one sentence in your mouth right now, something we will use as our anchor. Say it with me. Supply flows to me freely. It flows to me now. My word is my wand. Again, supply flows to me freely. It flows to me now. My word is my wand. And if you would like tomorrow's teaching to find you the way this one did, I would love for you to subscribe so we can keep walking this road together. If something in you just went quiet as you said those words, if some tired, striving part of you finally exhaled, then type the words "God supplies" right into the comments below. Let it be your seal. Let it be the first small act of faith that opens the rest of this teaching. Key 1. Your words are instructions, not commentary. The first key is this: your words are not commentary on your life, they are instructions to it. Most of us speak the way we would write in a diary, describing what already happened. My bills are high, my luck is thin, business is slow. But Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the spoken word is a creative force. It does not merely describe your condition, it produces your condition. And this is the part that quietly rearranges everything once you truly see it. Because a diary entry has no power over tomorrow, it only records yesterday. But a decree is not looking backward at all. A decree is facing forward, shaping the very thing it claims to be reporting. So when a woman kept saying, "I never have enough for emergencies," she believed she was simply stating a fact, the way you might say, "The sky is gray today." But Florence Scovel Shinn would gently stop her there and say, "No, you are not describing your account. You are giving your account its orders." And the universe, being a faithful waiter, kept bringing her exactly what she ordered, again and again, never late, never confused, only obedient. This is why the same phrase said for 7 mornings in a row begins to feel different by the 4th day. It stops sounding like a complaint and starts sounding like a command. It is not a wish tossed carelessly into the air. It is a seed pressed firmly into soil. And soil, as you know, does not argue with the seed. It does not ask whether the seed deserves to grow. It simply grows what was planted, without hesitation, without opinion. So this week, notice the small sentences you let slip about money. Not to judge yourself, never that. But the way a gardener notices a weed. Before we continue, if you have been speaking the words, and your money, your health, or your love life still look the same, the words were never the problem. So I created the source code, a 90-day program that gives you the missing piece to finally bend your reality. You can find it on getsourcecode.sco, link in the description. Now back to the video. Gently, calmly, without alarm, simply naming what is there so it can be pulled before it roots any deeper. Listen for the tired little phrases that hide inside ordinary conversation. "I can't afford that. Things are tight right now. Money just disappears on me." And understand that each one is not a harmless complaint. It is a small hand, quietly writing your next bank statement before it happens. Once you see that your words have been building your circumstances brick by brick, morning after morning, you can no longer speak them carelessly ever again. You begin to guard your mouth the way you would guard a door, with something precious sitting just behind it, waiting to be let in or kept out by nothing more than a sentence. And once you feel that shift settle into you, once you catch yourself mid-sentence and choose differently, you are ready for the second key. Because guarding your words is only half the work. The other half is learning what to say instead. I speak only the words that build the life I am asking for. Key 2. Supply cannot flow through a fist. The second key is this: supply cannot flow through a fist. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that money is simply a symbol, a kind of visible faith, and like all currents it must move, it must circulate. If you clutch it out of fear, you interrupt the very motion that brings more of it to you. And this is one of the hardest teachings to actually live, because clutching so often disguises itself as wisdom. It wears the coat of responsibility. It calls itself being careful, when underneath it is simply fear wearing a nicer name. Think of a man who was terrified to spend on anything beyond the bare minimum. He called it caution. He called it discipline. His friends even admired him for it. But really, it was a silent sentence running underneath his life. There is not enough, and there will never be enough. And his bank balance obeyed that sentence far more faithfully than it ever obeyed his budget. He could recite the exact total in his account at any hour of the day, and yet somehow the number never grew, because a fist held tightly around a coin cannot also be a hand open to receive the next one. It is not the spending or the saving that decides your supply. It is the state of consciousness underneath both. A generous hand backed by fear is still fear, dressed up and smiling. And a careful hand backed by faith is still faith, quietly counting and calm. So the real question is never how much you are holding on to, it is what you believe about the source while you hold it. Picture two women with the exact same amount of money in the exact same month. One grips it, checking the balance 10 times a day, whispering, "What if this runs out?" And the other holds it loosely, saying calmly, "This is simply evidence of a supply that never stops moving." They are handling identical numbers, but they are living in two entirely different universes. Because Florence Scovel Shinn taught that it is never the object in your hand that determines your abundance. It is the consciousness holding the object. So this week, practice one small act of open-handed giving. Not from panic, not to prove a point, but calmly, as evidence that you trust the source behind the supply, and not merely the supply itself. Give a little more at a tip. Pay a bill a day early. Let a coin drop into someone's need without calculating what it costs you. And notice, as you do, whether your stomach tightens or stays soft, because that tightening is simply the old fear testing whether you truly believe what you have been saying. And watch how quickly the universe seems to notice that your hand is no longer closed. This single shift in the hand often does more than any raise ever could, because a raise only adds to a fist, while an open hand changes the very shape of what can be received. Once you understand that circulation is the law, and not merely a nice suggestion, you begin to ask a deeper question. Not just how do I release money well, but what kind of person releases money like that? And that question carries you straight into the third key. I open my hand because I trust the source, not merely the supply. Key 3. You cannot out-earn your own self-concept. The third key is this: you cannot out-earn your own self-concept. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that we are not punished for our beliefs, we are punished by them. And nowhere is this more visible than in the quiet story we carry about who we are financially. A woman may say she wants abundance, yet underneath, she is still narrating herself as the one who struggles, the one who is always behind. And no amount of hopeful words on the surface can outrun a self-concept working quietly underneath. Let me walk you through an ordinary day so you can see this mechanism at work. At 7, she checks her banking app and sighs before her eyes are even fully open. By 9, she tells a coworker, "I could never afford that," laughing as if it were simply the weather. By noon, she catches herself saying, "Money just runs through my fingers." And by evening she wonders, quietly and honestly, why nothing ever changes. But nothing needed to change, because all day she had been faithfully renewing the very self-concept that kept the door shut. This is not a story to shame you. It is a mirror. Most of us have lived some version of this day. Think too of the shopkeeper who never called himself poor, yet quietly thought of himself as someone who simply gets by. never thriving, never chosen, and notice how faithfully his shelves obeyed that quiet sentence. Never empty enough to close him down, never full enough to set him free. A self-concept does not need to be loud to be obeyed, it only needs to be repeated. Now set beside him a neighbor, with far less starting capital, who had begun quietly saying, "I am the kind of person things work out for." And within 2 seasons her small stall had outgrown his. Not because she worked harder, though she did work with joy, but because her inner mirror had already agreed to the increase before her hands caught up to it. This is the part Florence Scovel Shinn wanted us to see clearly. A self-concept works like a thermostat set into the wall of a house. You can open every window and light every fire you like, but the room keeps drifting back to whatever the thermostat holds. And the thermostat does not care how sincere your effort is. It only obeys the number it was quietly set to. So a woman can work 2 jobs and still hover near the very same ceiling she hovered near while working one, because the dial underneath the hours never moved. So Florence Scovel Shinn's answer was never to fight the bank balance. It was to quietly turn the dial underneath it, sentence by sentence, morning by morning. And there is a second layer worth sitting with. The self-concept is also what you quietly allow others to say about you without correction. The friend who jokes that you are always broke. The relative who calls you the careful one, as though caution were your entire nature. And every time you smile along and let the label stand, you sign your name beneath it once more. Pause for a moment and pick one real sentence you say about yourself and money. Something small and automatic. And simply ask, would the person I am becoming still say that? It is not the market that decides your ceiling. It is not your employer. It is the self you have quietly agreed to be. And the moment you begin revising that self, gently, without shame, the outer supply has no choice but to follow. Because outer things are always the last to move, they simply catch up, eventually, to what has already shifted within. This is why 2 people can stand in the very same industry, facing the very same numbers, and live in 2 entirely different financial worlds. And once you understand that the self-concept is the true account balance, the one no bank statement can ever override, you are ready to see how faith itself becomes the deposit that actually moves that number. I am the one abundance was always waiting to reach. Key 4. Faith is a decision, not a feeling. The 4th key is this: faith is not a feeling, it is a decision held steady, regardless of the feeling. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that most people wait to feel confident before they will speak with confidence. But that order is backwards, and it keeps the door locked far longer than it needs to be. They tell themselves, once I feel calm about money, then I will speak the calm word. Once the fear lifts, then I will claim supply. And so they wait, and the fear never quite lifts on its own. Because fear is not something that leaves first and lets faith walk in after. Fear is something that faith walks straight through, the way a lantern does not wait for the wind to die down before it agrees to burn. Faith is not the absence of fear. Faith is simply refusing to let the fear write the next sentence. Imagine a man staring at an unpaid bill on a kitchen table late at night, the numbers glowing on his phone screen, his stomach tight, his hands not quite steady, every instinct in him whispering that he should wait until he feels better before he says anything hopeful at all. And still, in that exact state, trembling and unconvinced, he says quietly, "Supply meets me before I even ask." Notice he does not wait for the trembling to stop. Notice he does not pretend the trembling is not there. He simply speaks straight through it. And that is not denial. That is the lantern lit inside the storm. A lantern does not need calm weather to keep burning. It was never designed to depend on the weather at all. It burns because someone decided it would burn, and kept the glass around the flame no matter which way the wind turned. This is the part almost everyone quietly skips. They want the peaceful feeling to arrive first and the faithful word to follow only once it feels true, when the whole teaching runs the other direction entirely. Speak first. Let the feeling catch up later, the way warmth follows a struck match rather than arriving before it ever strikes. Think of the woman who will not tell her landlord the rent is coming until she feels certain in her chest that it actually will, so she waits. Silent, tight, checking her account 11 times a day, when all along the steadier path was simply to speak the word while the uncertainty was still loud, not after it quieted down. Because if you wait for the fear to leave before you speak, you may be waiting for a guest who was never planning to leave on his own. So this week, when the tight feeling rises in your chest, at the register, over the bill in the middle of the night, do not wait for it to pass before you speak your word. Speak it right through the tightness, calmly, evenly, like a lantern held steady in a wind it did not choose and does not need to negotiate with. I hold my word steady, even while the feeling still trembles. Friend, if that steadiness just met something tired in you, let this be the moment you decide not to walk this alone anymore. Subscribe now, so the next teaching finds you before the wind rises again. Key 5. The channel is not the spring. The fifth key is this, and it is the deepest one. So let us walk through it slowly, in 3 pieces. First, consider where supply actually originates. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that your job, your clients, your paycheck are never the source of your supply. They are only channels, and a channel is not a spring. A channel simply carries what a spring provides. Picture a woman who built her small business around a single steady client. Every invoice she sent felt like a lifeline, and when that client grew quiet for 2 weeks, she could not sleep. She paced her kitchen at midnight, rehearsing every version of disaster, because in her mind, that one client had quietly become her entire source, not a channel at all, but the spring itself. And when we mistake the channel for the spring, we hand a mortal, limited thing the authority that belongs only to the infinite. That one evening she remembered a line she had written on a card months earlier, and she said it out loud, slowly, into the empty kitchen. My supply does not depend on any one door, and something in her chest loosened for the first time in weeks. Within the month, not only did the original client return, but 2 new ones arrived from directions she never could have engineered. This is not luck. This is simply what happens when a person stops worshiping the channel and returns their faith to the spring behind it. A spring that feeds one stream can just as easily feed 10. It is not the client who pays you. It is the source moving through the client. And the source was never running low. And this same forgetting happens in quieter, less dramatic ways too. A salaried man may never once think of his paycheck as a channel. He simply calls it his job. And quietly, without ever saying so aloud, he begins to believe that a single employer holds the entire weight of his future in one pair of hands. So when rumors of layoffs move through the office, his whole nervous system reacts as though the spring itself were drying up, when in truth, only one small channel among countless possible channels was ever in question. Florence Scovel Shinn would say to him exactly what she would say to anyone. Your security was never supposed to rest on that one channel in the first place. It was only ever meant to rest on the spring, and the spring has never once, in all of recorded history, run dry. Second, consider how the spring actually reaches you. It is never through frantic grasping. It is through calm, repeated, spoken agreement. Florence Scovel Shinn described this as claiming your right, not begging for a favor. And there is a world of difference between the two. Imagine 2 people staring at the very same overdue bill on the very same evening. The first wrings her hands and says, "Please, please let something come through." Over and over, her voice climbing higher with every repetition. The second sits quietly and says only once, "Supply is already on its way to me," and then goes and washes the dishes, unclenched, unhurried, as if the matter were already settled. The first is pushing against a locked door with both fists. The second has already been handed the key and is simply waiting, without strain, for the door to swing. This is why the same 7 words, repeated with quiet certainty for 7 mornings, can outperform months of anxious striving. Because certainty is a frequency, and the spring answers frequency. It does not answer volume. It does not answer desperation. It answers the steady tone underneath the words, far more than the words themselves. And notice, too, that begging always keeps one eye on the clock. It measures how long the answer is taking and grows more frantic with every passing hour. While calm claiming keeps no clock at all. It simply repeats the word gently and returns to washing the dishes, to folding the laundry, to living the ordinary evening exactly as it would have lived it either way. This steadiness is not indifference. It is the deepest form of faith there is, because indifference does not care whether the answer comes, while calm claiming cares completely and simply refuses to let the caring curdle into panic. Third, consider what happens the moment the answer actually starts to move toward you. This is the part almost no one is taught, and it is the reason so many people receive the beginning of an answer and then quietly talk themselves right out of it. A man once told me, though of course not in these words, that a client had overpaid him by a wide margin, and his very first thought was, "This has to be a mistake, they will want it back." So he set the money aside untouched for a week, waiting for the correction that never came. Meanwhile, an entirely different door had opened for him that same week, an unexpected opportunity that felt, in his own words, too easy. And he let it pass by, because something that flows in so freely could not possibly be meant for him. Do you hear what happened there? The spring sent water twice in a single week, and the channel narrowed itself both times, right when it should have opened wide. Florence Scovel Shinn called this refusing your own good, and it may be the quietest way people block supply after they have already succeeded in calling it. So when the good begins to appear, however strange its shape, however early, however unearned it may feel against your old accounting of what you deserved, the discipline is simply to say thank you and to receive it exactly as it is, without shrinking it down to fit a smaller idea of yourself. And here is a small practice worth trying this very week. The next time anything good arrives, a compliment, a refund, an unexpected discount, a kindness from a stranger, resist the old reflex to explain it away, and instead say quietly, "So this is how the spring reaches me today." Let that sentence become a habit, because every time you receive without shrinking, you are training the channel to stay a little wider the next time. This is why the same person can pray faithfully for months and still stay poor. Not because the spring ever failed them, but because the instant the water arrived, surprise closed the very channel faith had opened. So here is the truth, threading all three pieces together. The source is infinite, the calling is calm and certain, and the receiving is simple and unafraid. It is not the size of your need that moves the spring, it is not the loudness of your asking that moves the spring, and it is not even the speed of the answer that proves the spring is real. It is the steadiness of your hand, held open on the receiving end. And when all three of these finally align in one person, the seeking of the channel, the calm claiming of the word, and the fearless receiving of the water, that person stops looking like someone who is trying to attract money and starts looking, quite plainly, like someone money is simply drawn to. Not because they chased it, but because they finally stopped narrowing the very current that had been moving toward them all along. I open wide to receive exactly what the spring is already sending. Key 6. Pass the flame forward. The sixth key is this, and it is the gentlest of them all. Once your words have begun to work, let them work quietly through you into someone else. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that supply multiplies fastest in the hands of those who bless it forward. Not out of duty, not to earn some invisible reward, but simply out of overflow, the way a cup filled past its own rim cannot help but spill onto the saucer beneath it. It is not hoarding that keeps your good, it is passing it along that keeps it moving. And it is the moving, not the keeping, that supply actually loves. Think of a small shopkeeper who had practiced these very words for 7 mornings. On the 8th, a tired customer worried aloud about her rent, and the shopkeeper simply said quietly and warmly, "Supply always finds a way." She did not know those 6 words would cost her nothing and give her everything. Within days, her own till was fuller than it had been in months, because a blessing spoken in faith never leaves the mouth that spoke it. It moves outward and inward at the very same moment. This is why Florence Scovel Shinn so often said that what you wish for another, you are quietly wishing into your own account as well. Picture a family gathered at a table worrying together over bills, each voice adding another log to the fire of scarcity. Now picture one voice quietly saying instead, "We always have enough," and meaning it. That sentence does not settle the bills by morning, but it changes the current running through the room, and it hands every person there a small flame to carry into tomorrow. A woman once sent a friend one line, "Supply always finds a way," and thought nothing more of it. Weeks later, that friend called back with an opportunity neither of them had gone looking for. because the word had gone out, and the word does not come back empty. Water that only pools in one place grows stagnant and still, but water that keeps moving stays clean and cold and alive. And a candle loses nothing of its own light by lighting a second candle beside it. In fact, it is only by being passed along that a flame proves it was ever truly lit at all. And it is often this very passing, this small, unhurried blessing spoken toward another, that quietly becomes the reason people start offering you money. Not because you asked, but because your word had already been at work long before they arrived. So let your faith become something you hand to the next tired soul who crosses your path. Calmly, without weighing the cost, the way a candle simply gives, because it was made to. I pass my flame forward, and mine is never made smaller. Here is the whole picture. It is not your effort that calls supply. It is your word. It is not your grip that keeps it. It is your open hand. It is not the market that sets your ceiling. It is your self-concept. It is not the calm feeling that must come first. It is the steady word that invites the feeling after. It is not the channel that is your source. It is the endless spring behind it. And it is not hoarding the flame that keeps it burning. It is passing it gently to the next candle. 6 keys. And yet if you look closely, they were never 6 separate things. They were 6 turns of the very same key, the recognition that your consciousness, not your circumstance, has been the true storehouse all along. And once that recognition settles into you, the outer world simply has no choice but to rearrange itself around it. If you have felt, even once tonight, that something in your own words has quietly been shaping the money that comes and goes in your life, I want to invite you into something built for exactly this moment. The Overflow Covenant is a short daily companion, just a few faithful minutes each morning, to keep these very words alive in you long after this video ends. It holds the affirmations, the reframes, and the gentle daily practice, so the old patterns do not quietly creep back in by the weekend. It is available today for a small and honest offering, fully backed by a simple refund if it does not serve you, and you will find the link waiting in the description below. Supply flows to me freely, it flows to me now, my word is my wand. And so, gently, faithfully, one spoken word at a time, people really do start offering you money. Because you finally stopped arguing with your own good and simply let it in.